Number 1. RV. I used to have an RV that I would occasionally take to the woods in order to spend some time with nature. And yeah, I know that a lot of people wouldn't consider camping in an RV to actually be camping, but I enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed it when I had the time to go in the fall and see the leaves falling from the trees. If I got there at the right time, then they would be falling pretty heavy and it would look like it was raining leaves. I worked in a benefits enrollment firm, and we tended to get very busy in the fall and winter for our open enrollment of benefits. I knew that the coming season would be very busy, and decided I needed some time to myself in the early fall. So I went on a trip before it began, to do a bit of a recharge before I even needed it. I went by myself in the RV. I drove out to an area that wasn't really designated as a camping area, but I had been there plenty of times before and never gotten caught. It was a bit off the path and had some of the most beautiful trees you would have ever seen. The first night out, I tried to relax as much as possible. I did catch everything at the right time, and the leaf show was extraordinary. I stayed up and out of the RV for as long as possible, even after dark. But as midnight approached, I decided I needed to go into the RV and do a little bit of reading before bed. I'd gotten maybe a chapter of the book read when I suddenly heard a noise. I had to do a double take, and at first thought it was only my imagination. But I listened closer when it came again. It sounded like something was scratching on the wall of the RV. I wanted to dismiss it, but it was a very eerie noise. It stopped, and then it started back up again. I peered out the window that was by me, but was unable to see a thing. As I was looking, I heard it again, but it had moved. I didn't think I had any reason to be afraid of anything, but I have to admit to feeling really uneasy about the noise. It was probably just a raccoon or something. However, hearing the scratch as it moved had really freaked me out a bit. I decided to get up and make sure all of the doors to the vehicle were locked. First, I checked the actual door to the RV, and it was unlocked. I reached over, not ashamed to admit I was nervous as hell, and flipped the lock. Nearly immediately after I did, I heard the scratching noise again, and it had moved again. I felt really freaked out then, but still tried to convince myself that it was no big deal. I then walked over to the cab of the RV. Checking both the driver door and the passenger side of the cab, I was relieved to know they were both locked. I felt a lot better, and decided to go and get back to my book if I could. Upon sitting down, I heard the scratching again. This really caught my attention because it was coming from the door, and it was too high to have been a raccoon. I then immediately thought bear, but wasn't sure if there were bears in that area. I never assumed that it was a person though. If someone had been out there and wanted to talk to me or something, I was sure they would just knock. I tried to ignore it again, but I found myself unable to get back into my book. Every time I heard the scratch, and I heard it a few more times, I got even more concerned. Whatever it was that was scratching the RV had to be something that was fixated on me. I was sure I was safe though, because no animal would have been able to get in. Now, I had the outside lights to the RV off, but thought suddenly that if I turned them on, maybe I would be able to scare away whatever it was, and so I went back to the cab, and I flipped on the outside lights. I nearly choked in shock when I saw someone standing in front of the RV, just outside the area of the lights. I jumped in shock, and then I heard the scratching noise, coming from the door again. Right after, the person in front disappeared. Then, the actual RV began shaking. Whoever was shaking it either had to be very strong, or there had to be more than one person out there. I wanted to just go, but didn't know if I would be able to see my way in the dark. And then, Nearly as suddenly as the shaking began, it ended. Terrified, I went and grabbed my compound bow and wished I had brought a gun instead. However, the protection of the bow was better than nothing. I also had a few kitchen knives that I could use if needed. The rest of the night went by pretty slowly, but calmly. After the RV quit shaking, I did not hear any more scratching. But I had already been scared out of my mind. I couldn't even make myself go to bed. I just was paranoid all day until morning. Right when the sunlight hit the RV, I decided to just leave and go home. So I drove the RV out of the forest. It was at the first gas station I went to that I realized what the scratching noise had been. Somebody was writing on the RV, on the door, and on the exterior, over and over, was written, "Don't fucking come back." I took the advice. I don't know what whoever was out there was up to, and I really didn't want to find out. I still occasionally went camping, but never in that area again. Number 2, rest area. We didn't really have a lot of money when I was a teenager, so when we went to visit our relatives, we always drove. And since we didn't have the kind of money that made it affordable to get a hotel room, we would often sleep one night in the car. There were 3 of us, children, and our mom. I was the middle kid, and my older brother stopped visiting family a few years before I did. We had a trip planned on in early October, and my younger brother ended up getting a role in the school play. He wasn't able to make the trip because of 2 rehearsal times that conflicted with the trip. My mom wasn't able to change the date of the trip, since she had put in for the time off work months in advance. So this year, the year I was 15 years old, my older brother remained home with my younger brother, and I went alone with my mom. I definitely didn't mind it so much. It gave me time to talk to my mom, which is something I didn't get a lot of chances to do anymore. My other siblings generally monopolized her time, and this time it was just us. My mom got off work earlier in an attempt to get out of town before rush hour. It was a beautiful drive, with the leaves changing color. We drove until 1 a.m., when my mom began getting very tired. It was then that we were coming up upon the rest area that we normally spent the night in. We pulled in. My mom picked a spot that was on the far end of the parking area, and we got our blankets and pillows and attempted to go to sleep. It wasn't long before the biggest difference between my mom and myself kicked in. She was able to fall asleep on a dime, no matter where she was, and she slept like a rock. Me, on the other hand, I could sleep easily when I was home in my own bed, but I nearly never slept in the car. For the most part on these trips, I might doze for a few moments here and there, but I rarely actually slept. I never told anyone I was up all night, however. And this night, the wind was blowing pretty hard. It was even shaking the car. As normal, my mom slept through it with no problem. I had dozed off, surprisingly, but was forced awake by both the wail of the wind and the shaking of the car. Unfortunately, I found that I had to go pee pretty badly, too. I knew I could get out of the car and go without waking my mom up, so I crept out of the car and lightly closed the door behind me. I made sure not to lock it, since I would be coming back to the car and didn't have keys for it. I didn't realize how windy it was until I got out the door. A few times I felt like the wind was gonna literally blow me off of my feet. In addition, the rest area seemed barren and empty, and there were a couple of other cars in the parking lot with us, but that wasn't unusual. We weren't the only people who couldn't afford to get a hotel overnight. I did not, however, see any people, and I really felt very alone. I tried to hurry a little bit, feeling like at any minute that I could end up wetting my pants, so I rushed and got up to the sidewalk that led to the front door. I didn't pay a lot of attention to anything going on around me. However, as I got closer to the front door, I noticed something. It was a man which wasn't unusual in of itself, but he was coming out of the women's restroom. He quickly went out the back door, which led to the back parking lot, where the semi-trucks normally were parked. Yeah, I thought it was strange, but didn't really see a problem with it at first. I had accidentally gone into the girls' bathroom before. I went in and went into the men's room, went to the bathroom and washed my hands. I would have just left the rest area, except that I heard a noise that to this day I cannot describe coming from the women's room. It was enough to cause me to stop. I thought about entering the restroom, while also having that nervous feeling any male has about going into the women's restroom. I cautiously walked over to the doorway when I heard another odd noise coming from there. There wasn't an actual door on the bathroom. It was a small hallway that curved into the bathroom. I'm sure you've seen those and know what I mean. I stepped in the hallway and looked down it, still not getting a look into the bathroom. However, what I did see was the smeared blood on the wall at the end of the hallway. Hearing more noises coming from the bathroom, I decided to just run in and see what had happened. A middle-aged woman was laying on the floor of the bathroom, and she was covered in blood. She was still alive, and when she saw me, she motioned to me to help. This was long before cell phones, and all I could do was tell her to wait as I went out to the lobby and called 911 on their payphone. The police and an ambulance were on their way. I was about to go back and check on the woman when a horrible thought passed through my mind. It had been several minutes since I had seen that man run out of the bathroom. My mom was sitting in an unlocked car at the far end of the parking lot. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't want to leave the woman, but I also needed to go out and protect my mom. I ran to the door and out into the windy weather. Looking down at our car, it didn't look like anyone else was there. But I had to be sure. I booked all the way to the car as fast as I could. I kept expecting the worst, but was relieved when I saw that my mom was sleeping soundly in the car. I opened the door, locked it, closed it, and ran back to the rest area. The police and ambulance arrived shortly thereafter. I didn't get much of the story at the time. My mom was woken by the sirens, and she was afraid when she hadn't seen me in the car. I hadn't considered that to be a possibility in my panicked state of being. The guy who had attacked the woman, who, thank God, lived through the experience, was actually her husband. He was picked up quickly by the police, as he had attempted to escape in his own car. Fortunately, other than giving a statement as a witness, I wasn't required to be involved in the case any further after it went to court. I always hoped that lady was able to recover from the terror she had to have experienced that windy fall night. I'm not sure I ever could if I was her. Number 3. Autumn Walk. I was the second oldest cousin in a group of 5 cousins. When we were all kids, we often spent a lot of time together, mostly at our grandparents' house during holidays and other get-togethers. My grandparents lived in a house that was out in the country. It was normal for my parents to want to go there as much as possible in the fall because how beautiful the countryside was at the time. We went to visit my grandparents in the fall of the year in which I turned 11 years old. The adults, including those who didn't have any children, were having talks and drinking beer, as was usual. Whenever this happened, the adults always sent us kids out, and generally told us to stay outside until dinner time. It wasn't really unusual, so we were used to it. The oldest of us, Kevin, was 12, and he was always in charge. It was really nice outside. It was that time of fall when the leaves had already changed colors, and they had begun falling in earnest. It was cold enough outside that we had to wear a jacket, yet nowhere near cold enough to even consider wearing a coat yet. It was around noon, and so we had to figure out something to do to keep us occupied. Usually this entailed us taking a hike through the woods. Sometimes, though, it was walking down the gravel road to a small convenience store that sold pop and candy and sandwiches. We had a little bit of money, and it would take us nearly all of our time to get there and back, so we decided to head up to the shop. It was a pretty chilly day, but I remember quite well. It was cloudy outside too, but that didn't deter us because we were on a mission. When we were getting closer to the store, a pickup truck came down the road. It stopped right by us. A big guy was in the passenger seat. He asked us if we needed a ride, and we told him no because we were not supposed to ride with strangers. He asked a few more times and really seemed like he wanted to give us a ride, but we kept declining, until he finally decided to get back on the road. About a half hour later, we came upon the store. As we approached it, I noticed the pickup truck in the driveway of the store. The man who had offered us a ride then came out of the store carrying some bags. He got in the truck, and he took off down the road, going the direction he had been when he asked us if we needed a ride. All 5 of us got to the little store and walked in. The very first thing we noticed was that no one was in the store. But this wasn't uncommon. It was owned by an older lady, and she was really the only one who ever worked there. We just figured she had gone to the back for something, and we began looking for snacks. I was at the cooler when I heard my young female cousin begin screaming. All of us ran up to where she was. She was standing behind the cash register, looking at the owner, who was laying on the floor and covered in blood. She wasn't dead, however, but was clearly in shock. We used her phone to call our families, who in turn called the sheriff. The owner survived, and we weren't shocked to find out that the man who had offered us a ride had shot and robbed her. He had actually previously served time for assault and for kidnapping. We had been very lucky that we didn't accept his ride offer, because then who knows what might have been. Especially because he did try really hard to convince us to get in that truck. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. Well, we are now in my favorite time of the year. I like the whole holiday season, but October and Halloween are by far my favorite. I have been saving up a lot of stories to make this month as good as possible. So if you aren't subscribed, make sure to hit the button to subscribe. And if you are, but you haven't hit the notification bell, make sure to do that and you'll be updated immediately whenever a video comes out. And if you like the video, please let me know by hitting the like button. And comment on the video and share it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter using the links in the description. My email is there too, so if you have an original story that you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it there. And in the meantime, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.